My name is Dr. Elena Rose. I am 32 years old and I am the youngest Chief of Neurosurgery at St. Jude Hospital in downtown Chicago. My sister told my parents I dropped out of medical school to become a drug addict. Because of that one lie, my parents erased me from their lives. No phone calls, no wedding invitation, no graduation. For 8 years, I was dead to them. Then last month, my phone rang at 3 a.m. during a historic blizzard. My sister was in the emergency room clinging to life after a catastrophic car accident. When I walked in to save her, my mother looked at me with pure hatred, not knowing that the daughter she disowned was the only person on earth capable of keeping her favorite child alive. Before I tell you what happened when I took off my surgical mask, please hit that like button and subscribe if you believe that the truth always comes out in the end. Leave a comment telling me where you are watching from. It was the kind of Chicago winter that freezes your breath in your lungs. The wind was howling against the glass walls of my office on the 40th floor. The city was shut down, buried under 2 feet of snow, but the trauma center never closes. My pager went off 3 times in rapid succession. Code red, trauma 1, severe traumatic brain injury. I didn't look at the patient's name on the digital display. I never do until I am scrubbed in. It is a rule I made for myself to keep my emotions detached. I just grabbed my white coat and ran toward the elevators. The hospital was in chaos. The storm had caused a 20-car pileup on the Kennedy Expressway, and the hallways were filled with stretchers and shouting paramedics. I moved through the noise with the focus of a soldier. This was my kingdom. I spent 18 hours a day here. I had sacrificed my 20s, my social life, and my sleep to become the best neurosurgeon in the state. As I approached the VIP waiting area outside the trauma unit, I heard a voice that made my blood run cold. It was a voice I hadn't heard in 8 years, but it still had the power to make my stomach tighten. It was my mother, Linda. She was screaming. I stopped behind a pillar, adjusting my surgical mask so it covered everything but my eyes. I pulled my scrub cap lower. Through the glass partition, I saw them, Thomas and Linda, my parents. They looked older. My father's hair was completely white, and my mother was wearing a fur coat that probably cost more than a nurse's yearly salary. They were cornering the head nurse, Betty, a woman who had worked a double shift and didn't deserve to be yelled at. My mother was pointing a manicured finger right in Betty's face. "My daughter is a VIP." My mother shrieked, her voice echoing off the sterile walls. "She's a famous fashion designer with over 100,000 followers. I demand you get the best doctor in this hospital. I do not want some tired resident or some intern touching her." I stepped out from behind the pillar. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my hands were steady. That is the training. You can be falling apart inside, but your hands must be stone. I walked straight up to the nurse's station. My parents didn't even look at me. To them, I was just another anonymous figure in blue scrubs, just part of the machinery they were trying to command. I picked up the tablet from the counter. I looked at the patient file. Sarah Rose, 29 years old, massive cerebral hemorrhage. The irony was almost suffocating. They were screaming for the best doctor to save their golden child, the fashion designer, the success story. They had no idea that the girl they threw out of the house at 24, the girl they thought was a failure, was the one holding the scalpel. "Get me the Chief of Neurosurgery," my mother yelled again, slamming her hand on the desk. "Do you hear me? I want the chief." I looked up from the tablet. I signaled for the security guard to step back. I didn't need protection. I was the one in control here. I walked up to my mother. I stood toe to toe with her. She looked at me with disdain, annoyed that a random surgeon was blocking her path. "Excuse me," she snapped. "Are you deaf?" I said, as I want the person in charge. I looked her dead in the eyes. I saw the recognition flicker for a second, but she pushed it away. She couldn't believe it. It wasn't possible. "You asked for the Chief of Neurosurgery?" I said, my voice calm, professional, and colder than the blizzard outside. I reached up and untied the strings of my mask. I let it fall to my chest. I watched the color drain from my mother's face. I watched my father grab the edge of the desk to steady himself. The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. "I am the chief," I said, "and you have exactly 5 minutes to sign these consent forms or your daughter dies." Standing there in the sterile emergency room, the smell of antiseptic vanished. Suddenly, I was not the Chief of Neurosurgery. I was 24 years old again. The white hospital walls dissolved, replaced by the floral wallpaper of my parents' living room. The humming of the medical machines was drowned out by the sound of thunder from 8 years ago. It was a Tuesday night in November. I remember it because I had just come home from the university library. I was exhausted, but happy. I had just been accepted into the residency program of my dreams. I walked through the front door, shaking the rain off my umbrella, ready to share the good news. But the house was too quiet. The air felt heavy, like the moment before a tornado touches down. My father was sitting in his leather armchair. He was not reading the newspaper. He was staring at a piece of paper in his hand. My mother was standing by the window, her back to me. And Sarah, my little sister, was curled up on the sofa, sobbing into a cushion. I dropped my bag. I thought something terrible had happened to a relative. I rushed over to Sarah. "What happened?" I asked, reaching out to touch her shoulder. "Is everyone okay?" My father stood up. He did not look at me with love. He looked at me with a disgust I had never seen before. He crumbled the paper in his hand and threw it at me. It hit my chest and fell to the floor. It was a bank statement, the joint account my grandmother had left for my education, the money that was supposed to pay for my final year of medical school and my living expenses during residency. $50,000. I looked at the balance at the bottom of the page. It was zero. I looked up confused. I do not understand. Did the bank make a mistake? Did we get hacked? "Stop it," my father roared. His voice shook the walls. "Stop acting innocent. It makes me sick." I looked at my mother. She finally turned around. Her eyes were red, but not from sadness. They were red from anger. "How could you, Elena?" she whispered. "How could you steal from this family? How could you throw your future away for poison?" "Poison?" I asked. I felt like I was in a nightmare. "I have no idea what you are talking about." Sarah let out a loud, dramatic wail from the sofa. She sat up, wiping her eyes. She looked at me, and for a split second I saw it. The calculation, the coldness. But then she blinked, and she was the victim again. "Tell them the truth." "Elena," Sarah cried, her voice trembling perfectly. "Please just tell them. I cannot cover for you anymore. It is too much. I am scared you are going to die. Cover for me." I stared at her. "Sarah, what are you saying?" She looked at our parents. "Mom, Dad." I tried to stop her. "I swear, I found the needles in her bag last month. She promised she would stop. She said the $50,000 was for a rehab center in California. She said she wanted to get clean. But then I saw her dealer behind the garage today. She gave him the money, all of it. My knees almost gave out. I felt the blood drain from my face. I had never touched a drug in my life. I spent my days in the library and my nights volunteering at the clinic. "That is a lie," I screamed. My voice sounded shrill and desperate. "That is a complete lie. Check my arms. Drug test me right now. I will go to the clinic right now." My mother walked over and slapped me. It was a sharp, stinging blow that echoed in the room. "Do not dare call your sister a liar," she hissed. "Sarah is the only one who cares about you. She has been trying to protect us from your shame." I looked at Sarah. She buried her face in her hands, but I saw her shoulders shaking. She wasn't crying. She was laughing. I knew exactly where that money went. I had seen the new designer bags she hid in her closet. I had heard her on the phone talking about her gambling debts with her boyfriend, a man who raced illegal cars. She had drained my account to save herself, and she decided to destroy me to cover her tracks. "Dad, please," I begged, tears streaming down my face. "Look at my grades. Look at my life. Does this make sense? Sarah is lying. She stole the money." "That is enough," my father yelled. He grabbed my arm and dragged me toward the door. "I do not want a junkie in this house. I do not want a thief. You are a disgrace to the name Rose." He opened the front door. The rain was pouring down in sheets. It was freezing cold. "Get out," he said. "But I have nowhere to go," I sobbed. "I have exams tomorrow. Please, Dad." "You should have thought of that before you became an addict," he spat. He pushed me. I stumbled down the front steps and fell onto the wet concrete. The rain soaked through my thin sweater instantly. My mother appeared in the doorway. She was holding a black garbage bag. She threw it at me. It contained a few of my clothes. "Do not contact us," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "Do not come to the house. Do not call your sister. As far as we are concerned, we only have one daughter, and her name is Sarah. If you come back, I will call the police." She slammed the door. I heard the deadbolt slide into place. I stood there in the dark, shivering uncontrollably. I looked at the window. Sarah was standing there watching me. She wasn't crying anymore. She pressed her hand against the glass and smiled. It was a small, triumphant smile. She had won. She had the money, she had the parents, and she had the house. I had nothing but the clothes on my back and a reputation that she had set on fire. I walked 3 miles in the rain to a 24-hour diner. I sat in a booth, dripping wet, shaking from hypothermia and shock. I ordered a cup of hot water because I couldn't afford tea. That night, curled up in the back seat of my old sedan, which I had parked a few blocks away, I made a vow. I would not die. I would not let Sarah's lie be the end of my story. I would become a doctor, not because they wanted me to, but because I was going to survive in spite of them. The memory faded as the sound of the heart monitor brought me back to the present. I blinked, and the living room was gone. I was back in the trauma center. The same parents who threw me out into the rain were now standing in front of me begging for help. The sister who smiled as I was cast out was now lying on a stretcher, her brain bleeding her life, hanging by a thread that only I could hold. My mother was still staring at me, her mouth open in shock. The silence in the room was deafening. I looked at the consent form in my hand. Pen, I demanded, holding out my hand. My father, trembling, pulled a pen from his pocket and handed it to me. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He knew. In that moment, looking at the Chief of Neurosurgery badge clipped to my scrubs, he knew exactly how wrong he had been. But I didn't have time for his guilt. I had a surgery to perform. I watched the pen tremble in my father's hand. It was a Mont Blanc, the same expensive brand he used to sign my report cards when I was a child, back when he still looked at me with pride. Now his hand was shaking so violently he could barely grip the silver barrel. He was not looking at the consent form. He was looking at me. His eyes were wide, scanning my face, searching for the 24-year-old girl he had thrown out into the rain. He was looking for the daughter who begged, who cried, who pleaded for mercy. He did not find her. That girl was gone. Standing in front of him was Dr. Elena Rose, a woman who had performed over 2,000 brain surgeries, a woman who held the record for the longest successful tumor resection in the hospital's history. I stood with my back straight, my hands clasped loosely behind me, my breathing slow and even. I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, no vindication. It was as if I were looking at two strangers who had accidentally wandered into my operating theater. Elena, my mother breathed, her voice cracking. She took a step toward me, reaching out a hand adorned with a diamond ring that was likely bought with the money they saved by disowning me. Is it really you? We heard you were. We thought you were. I did not let her finish. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I simply held up the tablet in my hand, displaying a high-resolution CT scan of a brain. The patient, Sarah Rose, presented with a Glasgow coma scale of 6, I said. My voice was crisp, devoid of any familial warmth. It was the voice I used for insurance auditors and difficult board members. My mother stopped. She looked confused, as if she could not process that I was speaking to her like a clinician. "Elena, please," she whispered. "It is Mom." I ignored her. I swiped the screen of the tablet, enlarging the image of the hemorrhage. "I need you to focus, Mrs. Rose," I said, using her married name. It hit her like a slap. I saw her flinch. "We do not have time for personal reunions. Your daughter has an acute subdural hematoma on the left side of her brain. The impact of the crash caused a tear in the bridging veins. Blood is rapidly pooling between the dura mater and the brain surface." My father finally found his voice. He looked down at the paper, then back at me. His arrogance was trying to surface a defense mechanism he had used my entire life, but it was weak. "Now listen here, Elena," he stammered. "I do not know what kind of game you are playing, pretending you did not know us, but we are your parents. We demand some respect." I looked at him. I tilted my head slightly to the side, examining him like a specimen under a microscope. "Respect is earned, Mr. Rose," I said. "Competence is demonstrated. Right now, I am the only person in this room who understands that the pressure inside Sarah's skull is currently 30 millimeters of mercury and rising. Normal is under 15. If that number hits 40, her brainstem will herniate, and she will be brain dead before you can finish your next sentence." The room went silent. The beeping of the monitors in the background seemed to get louder. I saw the reality sink in. They were not in charge here. Their money could not fix this. Their social status could not fix this. The lie they had told everyone about me dropping out of medical school was now the very thing choking them. I continued relentless. You told the triage nurse that Sarah is a fashion designer. I need to know if she's currently taking any medications. Is she on blood thinners? Does she use recreational drugs? My mother stiffened. She looked at the nurses standing nearby, terrified of exposing the family secret. No, she said quickly. Sarah is a good girl. She's very healthy. She takes vitamins. That is all. I wrote that down, knowing it was likely a lie, but I needed their denial on record. Fine, I said. I am noting that you denied any history of substance abuse. If we find opioids or amphetamines in her system during the toxicology screen and they react with the anesthesia, the complication will be on your hands, not mine. My mother went pale. She opened her mouth to speak, perhaps to confess, but she looked at my father and closed it again. They were still protecting the lie. Even at death's door, they were protecting the image of the perfect family. I checked my watch. 1 minute had passed. We are wasting time, I said. I looked at the CT scan again. The white spot on the image was massive, pushing the midline of the brain to the right. It was a ticking time bomb. I looked at my parents. I saw two people who had aged, who looked tired, who looked small. For a brief second, a memory tried to surface. A memory of my father teaching me to ride a bike, of my mother braiding my hair. I crushed it instantly. Those memories belonged to a dead girl. I stepped closer to them. I lowered my voice, making it intimate, terrifyingly calm. This is the situation, I said. The hematoma is expanding. It is compressing the centers of her brain that control breathing and heart rate. If we do not relieve that pressure, she will die. It is not a possibility. It is a certainty. I pointed to the line on the form where my father needed to sign. She needs a decompressive craniectomy immediately. I have to remove a portion of her skull to allow the brain to swell without crushing itself. It is a highly complex, high-risk procedure. The survival rate for a hemorrhage of this size is 40%. My mother gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. 40%, she sobbed. Oh my God, no, there must be someone else. We want a second opinion. I stared at her. I let a small, cold smile touch the corner of my lips. A second opinion will take an hour to get here, I said. She has 20 minutes, and even if you found someone else, you would be making a mistake. I leaned in my eyes, locking with hers. I am the best neurosurgeon in Chicago, I said. I am the youngest chief of department in the history of St. Jude Hospital. I specialize in catastrophic trauma. There is not a single pair of hands in the state of Illinois better equipped to save her than mine. I paused, letting the weight of my words crush them. Fate has a sense of humor, doesn't it? The daughter you threw away is the only one who can save the daughter you kept. My father looked at the pen again. He looked at the signature line. He looked at Sarah's motionless body on the stretcher through the glass doors. He realized he had no choice. He was trapped. Sign the papers, I said, turning to walk back toward the operating room doors. Or start planning the funeral. It makes no difference to me. The double doors of operating room 3 swung shut behind me, sealing out the rest of the world. The chaos of the emergency room, the screaming of my mother, and the blizzard raging outside all ceased to exist. In here, the air was filtered and cold, kept at exactly 68 degrees to discourage bacterial growth. I stood at the stainless steel scrub sink. I pressed the foot pedal and scalding hot water rushed over my hands. I grabbed the sterile brush and began the ritual. Up and down the fingers, across the palm, up the forearms to the elbows. I looked at my reflection in the chrome dispenser. My eyes were the same shape as the woman lying on the table inside. My chin was the same curve, but that was where the similarity ended. Sarah was chaos. I was order. Sarah was destruction. I was reconstruction. I entered the theater walking backward to keep my hands sterile. My team was already prepping the patient. The anesthesiologist gave me a nod. Patient is Sarah Rose, 29 years old, female. Intubated. Vitals are stable but weak. BP is 90/60. I nodded. I did not look at her face. I looked only at the draped area of her head that had been shaved and prepped with iodine. To me, she was not a sister. She was a biological system in failure. She was a puzzle of flesh and bone that I had to solve. Scalpel. The instrument slapped into my gloved palm. Time out, I said, my voice projecting clearly through the room. Everyone stop. The room froze. This was protocol. We are performing a left-sided decompressive craniectomy for evacuation of an acute subdural hematoma. Do we have the correct patient and the correct site? Correct, came the chorus of voices from my team. I placed the blade against the skin, just behind the hairline. For a fraction of a second, my hand remembered the time she braided my hair before prom pretending to be nice, only to laugh when I walked out the door. My hand remembered the sting of betrayal. Then the surgeon took over. I made the incision. It was a long curved line shaped like a question mark. I peeled back the scalp, revealing the white bone of the skull underneath. Drill. The high-pitched whine of the pneumatic drill filled the room. It is a sound that makes most people shudder, but to me, it is the sound of focus. I began to bore holes into the skull of the person who had destroyed my life. I was literally drilling into the past. The bone dust rose into the air, smelling faintly of burning calcium. I connected the burr holes with the craniotomy, sawing through the bone to create a flap. Careful, I whispered to myself. The dura is right there. I lifted the bone flap. Underneath the dura mater, the tough membrane protecting the brain was dark purple and tense. It was bulging outward, pulsing angrily with the pressure of the trapped blood underneath. She was minutes away from death. I took the scalpel again and carefully sliced open the dura. Dark clotted blood poured out immediately, relieving the pressure. It was a violent, ugly release. I worked quickly using suction to clear the field. I identified the source of the bleeding, a torn bridging vein near the sagittal sinus. Bipolar 1 commanded. I used the electric cautery to burn the vein shut, sealing the leak. The smell of cauterized tissue filled my mask. I worked with the precision of a machine. My movements were economical. No wasted energy, no shaking. I looked at her exposed brain. It was swollen, angry, and bruised. You are lucky, Sarah, I thought as I irrigated the wound with saline. You are lucky that I studied while you partied. You are lucky that I worked double shifts while you slept in. You are lucky that I'm better than you ever gave me credit for. While I was fighting God and physics to keep Sarah alive, the scene in the VIP waiting room was playing out very differently. My parents, Thomas and Linda, had recovered from their initial shock. The fear of death had receded slightly, replaced by a familiar feeling. Narcissism. They were sitting on the plush leather chairs in the private family area. My mother had gone to the bathroom to fix her makeup and reapply her lipstick. She could not be seen falling apart. A young nurse named Jessica walked in to check on them, bringing fresh coffee. "Here you go, Mr. and Mrs. Rose," Jessica said politely. "Can I get you anything else?" My father took the coffee, sitting up straighter. He adjusted his tie. "No, this is fine," he said, his voice booming with regained confidence. "We are just waiting for the surgeon." My mother leaned forward, crossing her legs. She gestured toward the operating room doors down the hall. "You know," she said, a smug smile playing on her lips. "Dr. Rose, the chief, that is our daughter." Jessica, the nurse, paused. She looked confused. "Oh, doctor, Rose is your daughter?" "Yes," my mother continued, her chest puffing out. "We are very proud. We always knew she was destined for greatness. We pushed her very hard, you know. We made sure she had the best education, the best tutors. Medical school is expensive, but we never hesitated to support her." My father nodded in agreement. "She gets her steady hands from me," he bragged, taking a sip of coffee. "I used to build model ships. Exact same skill set. We raised her to be a leader. It is good to see her finally taking charge." They were rewriting history in real time. They were erasing the rainy night they threw me out. They were erasing the years of silence. They were taking credit for the success of the child they had abandoned. Jessica frowned. She was a senior nurse who had worked with me for 5 years. She knew me well. She knew that I worked every holiday. She knew that I spent my birthdays alone in the cafeteria. She knew that when I won the Surgeon of the Year award, no one was there to clap for me. "That is strange," Jessica said, tilting her head. "What is strange?" my mother asked, annoyed that the nurse was not simply awestruck. Jessica set the coffee pot down. She looked at my parents with a mixture of confusion and pity. "I have worked with Elena for 5 years," Jessica said slowly. "We have had lunch together. We have spent Christmas Eve on call together." So my father challenged. So Jessica continued, her voice dropping to a whisper that cut through the room like a knife. "Elena has always been very clear about her background. On her employment forms and in all her conversations, she has always said the same thing. What What does she say? My mother demanded. Jessica looked them dead in the eye. She says she is an orphan. She says her parents died in a tragic accident 8 years ago. She says she has no living family. The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's mouth fell open. The coffee cup in my father's hand rattled against the saucer. The lie they had told the world about me being a dropout was nothing compared to the truth I had lived. I had killed them in my mind because that was the only way I could survive them. Jessica picked up her tray and walked out, leaving them sitting in the expensive leather chairs, stunned and humiliated, realizing for the first time that while they had been pretending I did not exist, I had been erasing them from reality completely. The surgery took 6 hours. It was a grueling marathon of focus and precision. I had removed the bone flap, evacuated the hematoma, and stopped the bleeding that was slowly killing my sister. When I finally closed the incision with 45 staples, my hands were cramping but steady. I had done it. Sarah was alive. She was stable. She was currently being transferred to the neuro-intensive care unit where machines would breathe for her for the next 24 hours. I stripped off my blood-soaked surgical gown and threw it into the biohazard bin. I scrubbed my hands until the skin was raw. I needed a moment, just one moment to breathe before I had to go back out there and face the 2 people who had destroyed my life. But a chief of surgery does not get breaks. I had work to do. I walked into my private office and locked the door. The silence was heavy. I sat down in my leather chair and turned on my computer. The glow of the monitors was the only light in the room. I needed to enter the post-operative orders. I needed to prescribe the correct antibiotics, the anti-seizure medications, and the pain management protocol. To do that safely, I needed the truth. Not the sanitized version my mother told the triage nurse, but the biological truth. My parents did not know that in the 8 years since they disowned me, the medical system had changed. We now had a federal interoperability system called Care Everywhere. It allowed doctors to pull up a patient's records from almost any hospital in the country. It was designed to save lives in emergencies, but right now, it was about to serve as the ultimate lie detector. I typed Sarah Rose into the search bar. I entered her date of birth and her social security number. I hit enter. I expected to see a few records, maybe a prescription for birth control, maybe an urgent care visit for the flu, or perhaps a sports injury from a yoga class. That is what you would expect from a successful fashion designer living a glamorous life in the city. The system thought for a moment, circling, digging through the national database. Then the results populated. My jaw tightened. The scroll bar on the right side of the screen shrank to a tiny sliver. The list of encounters was endless. It was not a medical history. It was a rap sheet of self-destruction. I started reading chronological order, starting from 6 months after I was kicked out of the house. October 2018, Cedars Sinai Medical Center, Los Angeles. Diagnosis: acute alcohol toxicity. Blood alcohol level 0.35. Note: patient found unconscious in a hotel lobby. January 2019, Lenox Hill Hospital, New York. Diagnosis: opioid overdose. Narcan administered. Patient left against medical advice. My eyes scanned down the list faster and faster. The dates were erratic, the locations scattered. Miami, Las Vegas, Atlantic City, New Orleans. There were no records of annual checkups, no records of a stable life. It was just a map of party cities and emergency rooms. Then I saw the surgical history. My mother had bragged about Sarah's beauty, about how natural and perfect she was. The screen told a different story. August 2020. Urgent care, Tijuana, Mexico. Diagnosis: necrotic tissue infection, secondary to unlicensed gluteal injections. November 2021. Miami General. Revision rhinoplasty complications, septal perforation. Sarah had been carving herself up in back alleys and cheap clinics, chasing an aesthetic she couldn't afford, all while my parents likely paid for what they thought were business trips and fabric sourcing for her non-existent fashion line. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. This was not just a girl who liked to party. This was a person who was spiraling into the abyss, and my parents, in their blind adoration, had enabled every single step of it. But the biggest shock was yet to come. I clicked on the insurance tab. I needed to authorize the billing for the surgery I had just performed. A craniectomy is a $100,000 procedure. The ICU stay would be another $10,000 a day. The screen refreshed. Status inactive. Terminated February 2024. Reason non-payment of premiums. I stared at the date. That was 2 years ago. I knew for a fact that my father sent Sarah $2,000 a month specifically for her health insurance. I knew this because before I was disowned, he used to lecture me about the importance of good coverage. He was obsessive about it. He would never let his golden child go uninsured. I did the math in my head. $2,000 a month. 24 months, that was $48,000. Sarah had been taking the money. She had been pocketing every single cent my father sent her to protect her health. And where did it go? I looked back at the medical notes from a visit in Chicago 3 months ago. ER admission for a fractured wrist. The nurse's note caught my eye. Patient accompanied by boyfriend identified as Mark. Boyfriend became aggressive with staff when refused narcotics for patient. Security called to escort him out. Mark. I remembered that name. My mother had mentioned him in a holiday newsletter I had seen on a relative's Facebook page. She had described him as a venture capitalist investing in Sarah's brand. I typed his name into the cross-reference system. Mark, distinctive tattoo on neck. He wasn't a venture capitalist. The system flagged him as a frequent flyer in the drug-seeking database. The picture was now complete. It was ugly and it was undeniable. Sarah was not a designer. She was a funding source for a junkie boyfriend. She had taken nearly $50,000 of my parents' hard-earned retirement money meant for her safety and likely injected it into her arm or snorted it up her nose. I sat back in my chair. The room felt freezing. For 8 years, I had carried the shame of being the bad daughter. I had let their accusation of drug addiction haunt me. I had worked double shifts, eaten instant noodles, and studied until my eyes bled to prove to myself that I was clean, that I was worthy. And all this time, the real addict was sleeping in their guest room. The real thief was eating their food and spending their money. My parents were currently sitting in my waiting room, probably telling anyone who would listen about their perfect daughter and her unfortunate accident. They were sitting on a throne of lies that was about to collapse. I printed the documents. The sound of the printer was rhythmic and sharp like a judge's gavel. I printed the toxicology screenings from her past admissions. I printed the insurance termination letter. I printed the notes about the botched surgeries. I stacked the papers neatly. They were warm in my hands. This was not just paper. This was ammunition. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to scream. I was simply going to do my job. I was going to update the family on the patient's condition. And part of that update would involve a very detailed, very public discussion about why their insurance card was declined and why Sarah's body was showing signs of chronic abuse that had nothing to do with a car crash. I stood up and put my white coat back on. I buttoned it all the way to the top. I checked my reflection. Dr. Elena Rose, Chief of Neurosurgery. I picked up the file. It is time to go to work, I whispered to the empty room. I unlocked the door and walked out into the hallway. The click of my heels on the linoleum floor sounded like a countdown. I was heading to the waiting room, and I was bringing the truth with me. I walked down the hallway toward the private family consultation room. The folder in my hand felt heavy, not because of the paper inside, but because of the devastation it contained. I paused for a second outside the door. I could hear them talking inside. Their voices were low, but the tone was unmistakable. It was the tone of people who felt they had won. They thought they had their golden child back, and they thought they had reclaimed their scapegoat to pay for it all. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was quiet and luxurious, reserved for the families of our most critical patients. My mother, Linda, was sitting on a beige sofa, holding a cup of herbal tea that a nurse had likely fetched for her. My father, Thomas, was standing by the window looking out at the blizzard. When I entered, the atmosphere shifted instantly. My mother set her tea down and stood up. She smoothed her skirt, putting on that familiar mask of maternal warmth that she wore when she wanted something. "Elena," she said, her voice dripping with a sweetness that made my skin crawl. "The nurse said Sarah is stable. She said you saved her." I stayed near the door. I did not step further into their space. I kept my face neutral, my posture rigid. "She is stable," I said flatly. "She is in the ICU. The next 24 hours are critical, but the immediate threat is contained." My father turned away from the window. He walked over to my mother and put a hand on her shoulder. He looked at me, nodding slowly as if he were approving of a subordinate's performance. "Good," he said. "You did your job. We are pleased." Pleased, as if I had just mowed the lawn or washed his car. My mother took a step toward me, opening her arms as if she expected a hug. I did not move. She stopped, sensing the invisible wall I had built around myself. She let her arms drop, but her smile remained fixed. "You know, Elena," she said, tilting her head, "your father and I have been talking while you were in surgery. We have had a lot of time to think." I waited. I knew what was coming. The manipulation. The twisting of reality. "We have decided to forgive you," she said. I almost choked on the air in the room. "Forgive me? For what? For being thrown out? For surviving?" "Yes," my father added, stepping in to reinforce the narrative. "We know things were difficult 8 years ago. We know you were lost. But seeing you today, seeing that you have made something of yourself, we are willing to put the past behind us. We are willing to let you back into the family." My mother nodded eagerly. "We can be a family again," she said. "You, me, Dad, and Sarah, just like old times. We can have Christmas together. You can come to the lake house in the summer. We are ready to welcome you home, Elena." I stared at them. The audacity was breathtaking. They were rewriting history in real time. They were framing their abandonment of me as a temporary pause, a timeout that they were now graciously ending because I had proven myself useful. And my father continued, his voice dropping to a more practical tone. "Since we are moving forward, there is a small matter we need to handle. The nurse gave us some paperwork. Financial paperwork." He waved his hand dismissively toward a stack of forms on the coffee table. "Obviously, we should not have to deal with this," he said. "You are the chief of the department. This is your hospital. We assume you have perks, family discounts, professional courtesy." My mother chimed in, her eyes gleaming. "Exactly. And whatever is left over, well, we think it would be a lovely gesture if you took care of it. Consider it a peace offering, an apology for the 8 years of silence. You have done well for yourself, Elena. We can see that. It is only right that you help your sister get back on her feet." I felt a laugh building in my chest. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a cold, dark thing. "So let me get this straight," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "You want me to erase the bill, and anything I cannot erase you want me to pay? As an apology to you." My father shrugged as if it were the most logical thing in the world. "It is the least you can do," he said. "We raised you, we gave you life, and frankly, you owe us for the stress you caused us when you ran away." I looked at them. I looked at the expensive clothes they wore. I looked at the arrogance etched into their faces. I walked over to the table. I placed the folder I was carrying on top of the forms they had ignored. I opened it. "This," I said, pointing to the document on top, "is the preliminary bill for the surgery, the operating theater rental, the anesthesia team, and the initial ICU admission." My father leaned in, squinting at the number. $150,000, he read. His face turned red. "This is outrageous," he sputtered. "This is robbery." I ignored him. "And this," I said, flipping the page, "is the estimated cost for her recovery. She will need weeks of inpatient rehab, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, another $50,000 minimum." My mother waved her hand. "Well, that is what insurance is for," she said dismissively. "Sarah has excellent insurance. We send her money for the premiums every month. Blue Cross Platinum. Just bill them." I looked at her. This was the moment. I pulled out the printout from the federal database. I laid it gently on the table, smoothing it out with my hand. "I am afraid that is not possible," I said. "Why not?" my father demanded. "Because Sarah does not have insurance," I said. The room went silent. "What are you talking about?" my mother whispered. "We send the check, $2,000, every month for 2 years. I tapped the paper. "Sarah's policy was terminated 2 years ago for non-payment," I said. She pocketed the money. "She has been uninsured since February of 2024. My parents stared at the paper. They stared at me. "That is a lie," my father shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "Sarah would not do that. She is responsible. She is a business owner." I flipped to the next page. The toxicology report. "She is not a business owner, Dad." I said, my voice rising just enough to cut through his denial. "She is an addict, and the money you sent her, it did not go to Blue Cross. It went to her veins and to her boyfriend, Mark." I watched the color drain from their faces. "You are lying," my mother hissed. "You are just jealous. You have always been jealous of her. You are making this up to hurt us. I laughed then. It was a sharp, humorless sound. I am the Chief of Neurosurgery, I said. I do not have time to make up stories. I deal in facts. And the fact is, your daughter is a fraud. She has no money, she has no insurance, and she has a medical bill that is currently $150,000 and climbing by the hour. I stepped back, putting distance between us. I am not a bank, I said coldly, and this hospital is not a charity. My father looked up, panic starting to replace the arrogance in his eyes. But we cannot pay this, he stammered. We invested everything in her company. We mortgaged the house. We do not have that kind of cash liquid. I shrugged. It was the same shrug he gave me when he threw me out into the rain. Then you better start selling things, I said. You have 30 days to settle the balance with the billing department. If you do not, they will send it to collections, and they will put a lien on whatever assets you have left. I turned toward the door. Where are you going? My mother cried, her voice shrill with fear. You cannot just leave us like this. You have to fix it. You are the doctor. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. I looked back at them one last time. I already did my job, I said. I saved her life. The rest is your problem. I walked out and let the heavy door slam shut behind me, cutting off their protests. I stood in the hallway for a moment, taking a deep breath. The air tasted sweet. It tasted like justice, but I knew this was just the beginning. I had dropped the bomb, but the explosion was far from over. The neuro-intensive care unit at 3 a.m. is the closest thing to a cathedral that science has to offer. It is a place of absolute silence and reverence, broken only by the rhythmic mechanical breathing of ventilators and the soft synchronized beeping of cardiac monitors. The lights are dimmed to a respectful twilight, casting long shadows across the linoleum floors. In bed 4, surrounded by a fortress of infusion pumps and glowing screens, lay my sister Sarah. I stood at the foot of her bed, watching the jagged green line of her heart rate trace across the monitor. 72 beats per minute, regular, strong. I had spent 6 hours inside her skull repairing the damage she had done to herself through recklessness, and now I was watching her body fight to accept the work I had done. Her head was wrapped in thick white bandages, a stark contrast to the perfectly styled hair she usually flaunted in her social media posts. Her face, usually caked in contour and highlighter, was pale and swollen, bruised from the impact of the airbag. For the first time in 8 years, Sarah looked human. She did not look like the golden child. She did not look like the fashion icon my parents worshipped. She looked like a fragile, broken thing that owed its continued existence entirely to me. I checked the hourly output on her drain. It was within normal limits. I adjusted the rate of her saline drip. I was performing the tasks of a nurse, not a chief of surgery, but I needed to be here. I needed to be the first face she saw when she came back from the darkness. I needed to see the recognition in her eyes. I needed to know if the brain damage had erased the malice or if it was still there, coiled and waiting like a snake. The sedative was wearing off. I could see the signs. Her fingers twitched against the crisp white sheets. Her eyelids fluttered, fighting against the weight of the anesthesia. A low moan escaped her lips, a sound of pure, raw confusion. "Sarah," I said softly. My voice was calm, professional. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes opened. At first there was nothing but the fog of drugs. Her pupils were sluggish, dilated. She blinked, trying to focus on the ceiling tiles. She tried to lift her hand to touch her head, but the restraints I had ordered for her own safety, of course, kept her wrists tied to the bed rails. Panic flared in her eyes. She pulled against the straps, her breath hitching in her throat. "Calm down," I commanded. "You are in the hospital. You were in an accident. You just had surgery." She froze. She turned her head slowly, wincing from the stiffness in her neck. Her gaze traveled up my white coat, past the stethoscope around my neck, and locked onto my face. I saw the moment the fog cleared. I saw the exact second she realized who was standing over her. "Elena," she rasped. Her voice was dry, cracking like old parchment. "Hello, Sarah," I said. She blinked rapidly, as if trying to clear a hallucination. She looked at the ID badge clipped to my chest. She squinted, reading the bold letters. Chief of Neurosurgery, Dr. Elena Rose. Her eyes went wide. The shock was so visceral, it spiked her heart rate monitor. The beeping accelerated. "Beep, beep, beep." "You," she whispered. "You are The doctor. I'm the surgeon who just spent 6 hours picking bone fragments out of your brain, I replied. I am the reason you are not currently in the morgue. She stared at me. I expected tears. I expected gratitude. I expected a miraculous reconciliation born from a near-death experience. But I had forgotten who my sister was. I had forgotten that Sarah did not operate on gratitude. She operated on leverage. Her eyes darted around the room, checking for our parents. Seeing we were alone, her expression shifted. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by a sharp, calculating look that I remembered all too well from our childhood. Where are Mom and Dad? She demanded, her voice gaining a little strength. They are in the waiting room, I said. I told them to go home and sleep, but they refused. They are sleeping in chairs. They are very worried about their precious fashion designer. At the words fashion designer, Sarah flinched. She looked at the computer terminal beside her bed. She looked at the clipboard in my hand. She was not stupid. She knew how hospitals worked. She knew that as her surgeon, I had seen everything. You saw my chart, she said. It wasn't a question. I answered. I saw the toxicology screen from tonight. I saw the history of overdoses. I saw the botched surgeries in Mexico. I saw the terminated insurance policy. She went pale. The monitor beeped faster. You can't tell them, she hissed. She tried to sit up, but the pain forced her back down. You can't tell them, Elena. It will kill them. It won't kill them, I said, crossing my arms, but it might kill their bank account. They think you are a success. They think the $50,000 I supposedly stole was the only financial tragedy in this family. They have no idea you have been bleeding them dry for years. Sarah's face twisted. It was an ugly expression, a mixture of fear and entitlement. It is not your money, she spat. It is family money. I deserved it. I stayed. You left. You ran away and left me to deal with them. I didn't run away, Sarah, I said, my voice dropping an octave. I was thrown out. Because you lied. Because you framed me to cover your gambling debts. It doesn't matter, she screamed, though it came out as a strangled whisper. It was 8 years ago. Get over it. I looked at her. 8 years. I had spent 8 years building a life from scratch while she had spent 8 years destroying the safety net I was denied. I am not the one who needs to get over it, I said. You are the one with a $150,000 bill and no way to pay it. Sarah stared at the ceiling. I could see the gears turning in her damaged brain. She was looking for an exit. She was looking for a weapon. And then she found one. She looked back at me and a slow, cruel smile spread across her lips. It was the same smile she gave me the night I was kicked out into the rain. You are going to fix this, she whispered. Excuse me, I asked. You're going to delete those records, she said. You're going to tell Mom and Dad that the insurance company made a mistake. You are going to tell them the toxicology screen was a false positive caused by, I don't know, the anesthesia. You are the chief. They will believe you. I shook my head, almost impressed by her delusion. I will do no such thing. Then I will scream, she said. Her voice was low, venomous. I will start screaming right now. I will tell the nurses that you hurt me. I will tell Mom and Dad that you came in here and squeezed my IV line. I will tell them you pressed on my incision. I will tell them you whispered that you wanted me to die on the table. She paused, letting the threat hang in the air between us. Think about it, Elena. You are the estranged daughter who suddenly shows up. You have a motive. You hate me. If I say you tried to hurt me, who will they believe? The poor victimized patient in the ICU, or the cold, heartless doctor who hasn't spoken to her family in a decade? I will sue you. I will sue this hospital. I will ruin your career. You will lose everything you built. She leaned her head back against the pillow, looking satisfied. So here is the deal, she said. You make the bill go away. You keep your mouth shut about the drugs. And in exchange, I let you play the hero. I let you be the good doctor. Do we have an agreement? I stared at her for a long moment. I looked at the bandage on her head. I looked at the vitals on the screen. It was tragic, really. She thought she was playing chess, but she didn't realize she was playing against a grandmaster. She thought we were still in our parents' living room, where the loudest crier wins. She didn't realize we were in my world now. I reached into the pocket of my white coat. Sarah watched me, her eyes narrowing. What are you doing? She asked. I pulled out my hospital-issued smartphone. The screen was glowing. A red timer was counting up. 0412, 0413. I turned the screen so she could see it. Sarah, I said, my voice incredibly gentle. This is a teaching hospital. As the Chief of Neurosurgery, I dictate my post-operative notes in real time. I also record all patient interactions when there is a known history of familial conflict, specifically to protect the hospital from liability. Her eyes widened. The smirk vanished. I tapped the screen. Playback. Her voice, tinny and clear, drifted out of the speaker. If I say you tried to hurt me, who will they believe I will sue you? I will ruin your career. The color drained from her face so completely that she looked like a corpse. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. This recording, I said, tapping the phone against my palm, is automatically uploaded to the hospital's secure legal server. It is timestamped. It is encrypted. And it is admissible in court. I took a step closer to the bed. This is not our childhood home, Sarah. You cannot manipulate reality here. In this building, evidence is king. And you just gave me the most incriminating piece of evidence imaginable. You just admitted to conspiring to commit insurance fraud and defamation of a medical professional. Tears began to well up in her eyes. Real tears this time. Tears of terror. Please, she whispered. Elena, please, delete it. I didn't mean it. I'm confused. It's the drugs. I shook my head. I cannot delete it, I said. It is already on the server. The legal department will review it in the morning. That is standard protocol for any threatened lawsuit. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. So here is the new deal, I said. You are going to be a model patient. You are not going to complain. You are not going to threaten the nurses. And when mom and dad come in here, you are going to tell them the truth. You are going to tell them about the insurance. You are going to tell them about the drugs. No, she sobbed. They will kill me. They will disown me. I leaned down, bringing my face inches from hers. Then you better start looking for a cardboard box to live in, I whispered. Because that is what happened to me. And I survived. Let's see if you can. I straightened up and smoothed my coat. I will send the nurse in to give you a sedative, I said. You need to sleep. Your blood pressure is getting too high. I walked to the door. Sarah was sobbing quietly into her pillow, the sound of a bully who had finally punched a wall that wouldn't break. Oh, and Sarah, I said, pausing with my hand on the switch to dim the lights further. She looked up at me, her face a mask of misery. Welcome to the real world. I stepped out into the hallway, the sound of her weeping fading behind the heavy glass door. I felt a strange lightness in my chest. The ghost of the 24-year-old girl who had cried in the rain was finally gone. She had been avenged. I checked my pager. Trauma 1 was clear. I had rounds in 4 hours. I walked toward the elevators, ready for whatever came next. The surgery was a success. The patient would live, but the reckoning had just begun. It was 7 in the morning when the illusion of my parents' wealth finally shattered. I was sitting in my office drinking black coffee and watching the snow swirl against the glass windows. The city of Chicago was waking up, but I had not slept. I was running on adrenaline and the cold satisfaction of the night before. My desk phone rang. It was the internal line from the billing department. Dr. Rose, this is Mrs. Higgins from Patient Financial Services. Mrs. Higgins was a stern woman who had worked at St. Jude for 30 years. She did not make social calls. Good morning, Mrs. Higgins, I said. Is there a problem with the admission paperwork for Sarah Rose? There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear the clicking of a keyboard. Dr. Rose, I am calling because we have a problem with the deposit. As you know, for uninsured patients, we require a down payment of 20% of the estimated cost before we can proceed with non-emergency post-operative care. I leaned back in my chair. I knew this. That was why I had told my father to handle it. My father provided a credit card, I said, an American Express Platinum. He did, Mrs. Higgins replied, her voice dropping to a whisper. But the card was declined. I frowned. My father was a man who obsessed over his credit score. He treated his financial standing like a religion. For his card to be declined was unheard of. Did you run it again, I asked. Maybe it was a fraud alert because of the large amount. We ran it 3 times, Dr. Rose. The code returned is 51, insufficient funds. We also tried the backup Visa card he provided. That one was declined as well. The system shows that both accounts are over their limit. I stared at the phone. My parents had walked into this hospital wearing furs and designer suits, acting like royalty. They had sneered at the bill, and yet they did not have enough credit to pay for a hospital bed. Thank you, Mrs. Higgins, I said quietly. Do not contact the family yet. Give me an hour. I will handle it. I hung up. Something was wrong. Something was terribly wrong. My father had retired with a substantial pension. Their house in the suburbs was worth at least $800,000. They should be comfortable. They should be secure. Unless... I picked up my cell phone and dialed a number I had not used in a while. It belonged to Marcus, a college friend who was now a high-powered real estate attorney in the city. "Marcus, I need a favor," I said as soon as he answered. "I need you to run a title search on a property. 42 Oakwood Drive. The owners are Thomas and Linda Rose." "Give me 2 minutes," Elena Marcus said. "I can hear the panic in your voice. Is everything okay? Just look it up," I said. I waited, listening to the sound of him typing. My heart was pounding not with fear, but with a dark anticipation. I was pulling on a loose thread, and I had a feeling the whole tapestry was about to unravel. "Okay, I have the deed," Marcus said. "Elena, this house is heavily encumbered. What does that mean?" I asked. "It means they have a mortgage," he said. "A big one, but that is not all. 3 years ago, they took out a second mortgage, a home equity line of credit." "How much?" I asked. He whistled low and sharp. $300,000. "And the interest rate is variable. It looks like a high-risk loan, the kind you take when the bank says no to a standard refinance." I closed my eyes. $300,000. Marcus, who is the beneficiary. "Where did the money go? It says the loan was for business capital," he read. "The funds were disbursed to an entity called SR Fashion Group, LLC. SR Fashion Group." Sarah rose. "Thank you, Marcus," I said. "You just solved a mystery for me." I hung up and turned back to my computer. I opened the state business registry. I searched for SR Fashion Group, LLC. The results appeared instantly. The company was registered 3 years ago. The registered agent was Sarah Rose. The business address was listed as a suite in a commercial building downtown. I opened Google Maps and typed in the address. I zoomed in to Street View. It was not a fashion studio. It was not a warehouse. It was a strip mall next to a laundromat. The suite number belonged to a private mailbox rental store. The company was a ghost. It had no physical location, no employees, no revenue. So where did $300,000 go? I opened a new tab. I logged into a burner Instagram account I used to keep tabs on my patients' social histories. I searched for Sarah's profile. It was public, of course. She wanted the world to see her shine. I scrolled back 3 years, to the exact month the loan was issued. September 15th, 2023. Photo Sarah holding a glass of champagne in a first-class airplane seat. Caption New Beginnings. Paris, here I come. Hashtag Fashion Week, hashtag CEO, hashtag blessed. I scrolled forward. October 2023. Photo, a new white Porsche Cayenne with a red bow on the hood. Caption Company car. Hard work pays off. November 2023. Photo Sarah and a man on a yacht in the Maldives. The man had a distinctive tattoo on his neck. Mark. Caption Power couple. Building our empire. I kept scrolling. The timeline was a catalogue of excess. Designer bags, 5-star hotels, VIP tables at clubs. There were no photos of fabric samples, no photos of sewing machines, no photos of clients. There was no business. My parents had mortgaged their home, their sanctuary, the only asset they had left to fund a fantasy. They believed they were investing in the next Coco Chanel. In reality, they were funding a 3-year bender for their daughter and her junkie boyfriend. I felt a wave of nausea. It was not sympathy. It was disgust. They had thrown me out for allegedly stealing $50,000, which I never touched. And then they had voluntarily handed over 6 times that amount to Sarah to burn on vanity and drugs. But the final piece of the puzzle arrived 10 minutes later. My email pinged. It was the updated police report from the accident. The traffic investigators had finished their preliminary assessment. I opened the PDF. Vehicle 2023 Porsche Cayenne. Registered to SR Fashion Group, LLC. Driver unknown male. Fled the scene. Passenger Sarah Rose. Found in the passenger seat. I read the narrative. Witnesses state the vehicle was traveling at approximately 90 miles per hour in a snowstorm. The vehicle lost control and struck a concrete barrier. The driver's side airbag deployed. A male subject was seen exiting the vehicle through the broken window. He looked at the passenger, who was unconscious and bleeding, then fled on foot into the wooded area. I stared at the words. He looked at the passenger, then fled. Mark, the man my parents thought was a venture capitalist. The man Sarah had spent their retirement money on. He had been driving. He had crashed the car. And when he saw Sarah dying in the passenger seat, he didn't call 911. He didn't try to help her. He ran to save himself. The expensive car bought with the house money was now a twisted heap of metal. The business was a lie. The house belonged to the bank. My parents were not just broke, they were destitute. They were living on borrowed time in a house that was already underwater. And the moment the bank found out that the business had no assets, they would foreclose. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked down at the city covered in white. I imagined my father sitting in the waiting room right now, sipping his coffee, thinking he was the patriarch of a successful family. He thought he could just write a check and make the problem go away. He had no idea that the check would bounce. He had no idea that he was homeless. The twist was so cruel, it was almost poetic. They had sacrificed their relationship with their competent, hard-working daughter to bet everything on a lie, and now the lie had crashed into a concrete wall. I picked up the phone again. I dialed the number for the hospital's legal department. "This is Dr. Rose," I said. "I need to speak to the risk management officer. We have a situation with a patient in the ICU. The family has no ability to pay, and there is a criminal investigation involving the vehicle. We need to lock down the room. No one enters and no one leaves without police clearance." I hung up. I was not going to tell them yet. Not about the house, not about the boyfriend running away. I was going to let them find out the hard way. I was going to let the credit card decline be the first domino. I checked my watch. It was time for morning rounds. I smoothed my white coat. I checked my reflection. I looked calm. I looked powerful. I looked like the only person in the Rose family who actually owned the ground she stood on. I walked out of my office. It was time to go downstairs and watch their world fall apart. The morning sun was beginning to stream through the windows of the family waiting room, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. My parents, Thomas and Linda, were huddled together on the small love seat, looking like two shipwreck survivors clinging to a piece of driftwood. They were whispering furiously to each other, likely trying to figure out which credit card to try next, or which relative they could call for a loan. I stood by the coffee machine, slowly stirring sugar into my cup. I was waiting. I knew the timing of the banking system. Foreclosure notices and default alerts usually hit email inboxes at 8 in the morning sharp. I checked my watch. 7:59. 3, 2, 1. A loud ping echoed in the quiet room. It came from my father's jacket pocket. He pulled out his phone, his forehead creased with worry. He swiped the screen to unlock it. I watched his face. I saw the exact moment his world ended. His eyes went wide, his mouth opened but no sound came out. The color drained from his skin so fast, he looked like he was about to faint. He dropped the phone. It clattered onto the linoleum floor. "Thomas," my mother asked, her voice trembling. "What is it? What happened?" My father didn't answer. He just stared at the wall, his breathing shallow and rapid. I walked over and picked up the phone. The screen was still on. The notification was from First National Bank. Urgent notice of default. Property address 42 Oakwood Drive. Immediate action required to avoid foreclosure proceedings. Total arrears, $42,000. I held the phone up so my mother could see it. She read the message and let out a strangled gasp, covering her mouth with her hand. "Foreclosure," she whispered. But we paid the mortgage. We used the business loan to pay the mortgage." I placed the phone gently on the table. "You didn't pay the mortgage," I said calmly. "Sarah spent the business loan on luxury cars and vacations. And because you leveraged the house to get that loan, the bank is now calling in the debt. You are losing everything." My mother looked at me, her eyes filling with tears. Then the desperation set in. She grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight, frantic. "Elena, you have to help us," she begged. "You are a doctor. You make so much money. You are rich. You can fix this. Just write a check, please." My father looked up, seizing on this lifeline. "Yes," he said, his voice cracking. "Elena, look at us. We are your parents. We raised you. We fed you. We put a roof over your head for 18 years. You owe us this. You cannot let us end up on the street. Think of the family reputation. Think of what the neighbors will say." I pulled my arm away from my mother's grasp. I took a step back, putting distance between us. The anger I had been suppressing for 8 years began to rise, not as a scream but as a cold, hard tide. "I owe you," I repeated. I looked at my father. "You say you raised me. Let's talk about how you raised me. You raised me to be a scapegoat. You raised me to be the backup plan in case your precious Sarah failed. And when she lied when she stole my future, you didn't even ask me for my side of the story. You threw me out like garbage. But we didn't know, my mother sobbed. We thought you were sick. We thought it was tough love. Tough love. I laughed, a sharp sound that cut through the room. Let me tell you what my life was like after your version of tough love. I started pacing in front of them, my voice steady and relentless. The first night I slept in my car behind a Walmart. It was November. The windows frosted over on the inside. I had $3 in my pocket. I bought a loaf of bread and a jar of peanut butter. That was my food for the week. My father looked down at his hands. I went to my medical school interview wearing a suit I bought from a thrift store for $5. It smelled like mothballs. I washed my hair in the sink of a public restroom at a gas station. I was so hungry my hands were shaking during the practical exam. Elena, stop. My mother whispered. Please. No, I said. You need to hear this. You need to know exactly who you're asking for money. I got a job washing dishes at a diner. I worked from 10 at night until 4 in the morning. Then I went to class at 8. I studied in the break room while the cook smoked cigarettes next to me. I didn't sleep in a bed for 2 years. I slept on a used mattress I found on the curb. I had to treat it for bedbugs myself because I couldn't afford an exterminator. I stopped pacing and looked directly at them. Do you remember my graduation day? My mother flinched. I graduated top of my class, summa cum laude. They called my name, Dr. Elena Rose. I walked across that stage and I looked out into the audience. Every other student had a cheering section. Every other student had flowers. I had an empty seat. I paused, letting the memory wash over me. I looked for you, I whispered. I actually looked for you. I thought maybe they will come. Maybe they saw my name in the paper. Maybe they realized they were wrong, but you were not there. You were probably on a vacation with Sarah spending the money that should have paid for my books. My father was crying now, silent tears rolling down his aged cheeks. We are sorry, he choked out. We made a mistake. A mistake is forgetting to buy milk, I said. Destroying your daughter's life is a choice. You chose Sarah. You chose her lies. You chose her comfort over my survival. And now 8 years later, you want me to use the money I earned, scrubbing floors and saving lives to pay for the wreckage she created? I shook my head slowly. I am not your savior. I am the ghost of the daughter you killed. And ghosts do not write checks. My mother fell to her knees. It was a dramatic, pathetic gesture. Please, Elena, she wailed. We have nowhere to go. They will take the house. Sarah is sick. We are old. Have mercy on us. I looked down at her. I felt a twinge of pity, but it was distant, like looking at a stranger in a movie. You have a car, I said. It is parked outside. It has heated seats. That is more than I had. I turned around and walked toward the door. I have rounds to finish, I said, and you have a foreclosure to deal with. I suggest you start packing. I walked out of the room, leaving them sobbing in the ruins of their own making. My heart was pounding, but for the first time in 8 years, it wasn't from pain. It was from the exhilaration of finally truly being free. The automatic doors of the intensive care unit slid open with a soft hiss that sounded like a warning. 2 uniformed police officers walked in. Their heavy boots echoed on the sterile floor tiles, a rhythmic thud that made the nurses at the station look up from their monitors. They were not here for a social call. They were here for business. I was standing at the nurses' station reviewing Sarah's latest electrolyte panel when I saw them. Officer Miller, a man I had worked with on many trauma cases, caught my eye. He gave me a curt nod. He looked grim. He was holding a clear plastic evidence bag in his gloved hand. I knew exactly what was in it. I walked over to meet them just outside Sarah's room. My parents were inside sitting by her bedside, holding her hand and whispering words of comfort to the monster they had created. Dr. Rose Officer Miller said, his voice low and professional. We need to speak with the patient. Is she conscious? She is awake, I said. She is stable enough to speak. What is this about? Officer Miller held up the bag. Inside was a small brick of white powder wrapped tightly in cellophane. We recovered this from the passenger side floorboard of the vehicle, he said. It was inside a designer handbag that contained the patient's ID and credit cards. We field tested it. It is heroin, high grade, enough to charge her with intent to distribute. I looked at the bag. It was the physical manifestation of 8 years of lies. It was the reason my parents lost their house. It was the reason I was homeless. And now it was going to be the reason Sarah lost her freedom. Let's go inside, I said. I pushed the door open. My parents looked up, their faces etched with exhaustion and fear. When they saw the police, my mother stood up instinctively, placing her body between the officers and Sarah, as if she could shield her from the law. "What is going on?" my father demanded, trying to summon his old authority. "My daughter is recovering from brain surgery. You cannot be in here." Officer Miller stepped around him. He was not intimidated by suburban outrage. "Sarah Rose," he said, looking directly at the figure in the bed. "I am Officer Miller with the Chicago Police Department. We need to ask you some questions regarding the contents of your vehicle." Sarah's eyes went wide. She saw the bag in his hand. "That is not mine," she said immediately. Her voice was shrill. "I have never seen that before." Officer Miller didn't blink. "It was found inside your Louis Vuitton purse, ma'am, along with your wallet and your keys." Sarah began to hyperventilate. The monitor started to beep faster. She looked at the officer, then at our parents, and finally, her eyes landed on me. I saw the gears turn in her head. I saw the panic shift into malice. She was cornered, and like a rat, she was about to bite. "She did it," Sarah screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. My mother gasped. My father looked confused. What Sarah continued, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. "It is her. She put it there. She hates me. She has been trying to ruin me since we were kids. She planted it to frame me." My mother turned to me, her eyes wide with horror. For a second, just a second, I saw her consider it. I saw her wonder if the daughter she had demonized for 8 years was capable of such evil. Officer Sarah yelled, "She's a doctor. She has access to drugs. She probably took it from the hospital and put it in my bag when I was unconscious. You have to arrest her." The room fell silent. It was the same script from 8 years ago. The same lie. The same victimhood. Officer Miller looked at me. He looked unsure. Accusations against medical staff were serious. "Dr. Rose?" he asked. I didn't flinch. I didn't get angry. I simply reached into the deep pocket of my white coat. "Officer," I said, my voice calm and authoritative. "Before you entertain the hallucinations of a desperate woman, I have something you need to see." I pulled out my tablet. "I spent the last 3 hours doing my own investigation," I said. "I contacted the trucking company whose semi-truck was driving behind my sister's Porsche when the accident occurred. Their vehicles are equipped with high-definition dashcams." I tapped the screen and turned it toward the officer. My parents leaned in, watching in stunned silence. The video played. It showed the white Porsche swerving erratically through the snow, but the audio was the key. The truck driver's dashcam had picked up the Bluetooth signal interference from the car ahead, a quirk of the specific radio frequency they were using. It wasn't perfect, but you could hear the shouting inside the Porsche. "Give me the bag, Mark," Sarah's voice screamed through the static. "I need a hit. Just give me the bag. You've had enough." "Sarah," a male voice yelled back, "you're going to kill us." Then the crash. I paused the video, that voice asking for a hit. I said, looking at Sarah, "Is that me, or is that the patient?" Sarah went pale. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "But that is not all," I continued. I swiped to the next screen. "Officer, as the attending physician, I ordered a comprehensive toxicology panel when she was admitted. If I had planted those drugs in her bag after the crash, her blood would be clean." I held the screen up to Officer Miller's face. I pointed to the red line on the graph. "Positive for diacetylmorphine," I read aloud. "That is heroin. Positive for fentanyl. Positive for cocaine." I turned to my parents. "This is not hospital-grade morphine," I said to them. "This is street drugs. This is what she has been doing with your retirement money." I looked back at the officer. "With all due respect," I said, "I am the Chief of Neurosurgery. I save lives. I do not plant evidence. And as her physician, I can professionally confirm that this patient has the physiological markers of long-term intravenous drug abuse, collapsed veins, scar tissue, abscesses. This is not a one-time mistake. This is a lifestyle." I handed the tablet to the officer. "Here is her entire medical history," I said, "including the rehab stints she checked herself out of. It is all there." Officer Miller took the tablet. He scrolled for a moment. He nodded. He turned back to Sarah. The look of uncertainty was gone. "Sarah Rose," he said, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. You are under arrest for possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute and for driving under the influence causing an accident. He walked over to the bed. Since you are currently hospitalized, you will remain under police guard until you are discharged. At that time, you will be transferred to the county jail for processing. No, Sarah screamed. Mom, Dad, do something. She's lying. The video is fake. My mother stood there frozen. She looked at the tablet in the officer's hand. She looked at the bag of drugs, and finally she looked at Sarah. The denial broke. The illusion shattered. She saw the needle marks on Sarah's arm, the ones she had ignored for years. She heard the desperation in Sarah's voice, the same desperation that had sounded so convincing 8 years ago when she blamed me. Mom, Sarah wailed. Tell them Elena is the bad one. My mother turned away. She couldn't look at her. She collapsed into the chair, burying her face in her hands, sobbing brokenly. My father stood like a statue staring at the floor. The shame was radiating off him in waves. Officer Miller cuffed Sarah's hand to the bedrail. The metallic click was the loudest sound in the room. I stood at the foot of the bed watching. You tried to do it again, I said softly to Sarah. You tried to destroy me to save yourself, but you forgot one thing. Sarah looked at me, tears streaming down her face, her eyes filled with hate. What she spat. I grew up, I said, and I brought receipts. I turned to the officer. Officer Miller, I will have the medical records printed and sent to the district attorney's office within the hour. You have my full cooperation. Thank you, Dr. Rose, he said respectfully. I walked out of the room, leaving Sarah screaming at parents who could no longer look her in the eye. I walked down the hall, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the heavy weight of their judgment. I felt light. I felt clean. The truth was out, and it was ugly, but it was finally undeniable. The week following Sarah's arrest was a blur of legal motions and financial collapse. I didn't visit her in jail. I didn't post her bail. I let her sit in a holding cell, going through withdrawal on a concrete floor, because sometimes the only medicine that works is consequences. But the real tragedy was happening 10 miles away in the house I grew up in. My parents were watching their world disintegrate. The bank didn't care about their tears. The foreclosure process, which had been looming for months while they ignored the notices, finally executed. The house on Oakwood Drive, the symbol of their status, the fortress they had thrown me out of, was seized. They called me on a Tuesday afternoon. My phone screen lit up with Dad. I let it ring twice before answering. I put it on speaker and set it on my mahogany desk, continuing to type my surgical notes. Elena. His voice was weak, trembling. It sounded like an old man I didn't know. I am here, I said, not stopping my typing. They came, he whispered. The sheriff came. They gave us 48 hours to vacate. They changed the locks on the back door already. I didn't say anything. I just listened to the sound of his breathing, ragged and panicked. We have nowhere to go. He continued, his voice breaking. Sarah is gone. The lawyer says she's looking at 5 years minimum. All our savings are gone. The retirement fund is gone. We used it all to try and save the house, but it wasn't enough. There was a rustling sound, and then my mother's voice came on the line. She was crying hysterically. Elena, please, she wailed. You have a big house. We saw it online. You have guest rooms. Please, just for a few months. Just until we get back on our feet. We are your family. You cannot let your parents live in a shelter. I stopped typing. I looked at the view of Lake Michigan from my office window. The water was gray and choppy cold and unforgiving. I remembered the night I left. I remembered asking them for one more night because of the storm. I remembered my mother handing me a garbage bag and telling me that if I came back, she would call the police. I leaned forward toward the phone. I cannot let you live with me, I said clearly. There was a stunned silence. What my mother gasped. But we are old. We are family. I am sorry. I said, my voice devoid of warmth. My house is my sanctuary. I do not invite chaos into my sanctuary. But we will be good, my father pleaded. We will cook. We will clean. We won't bother you. No, I said. The answer is no. I hung up the phone. I didn't block them. I just wanted them to sit with the number. But I wasn't done. I opened my laptop and logged into my secure email. I had a message waiting from Marcus, my real estate attorney. Subject 42, Oakwood Drive. Auction results. Elena, it is done. The LLC placed the winning bid. You own the property, free and clear. The bank accepted the offer of 600,000 cash. Closing is tomorrow, I smiled. A cold, sharp smile. I had bought their house. The house they treasured more than their own daughter. I had bought it using an anonymous limited liability company called Phoenix Rising LLC. They had no idea it was me. They just knew some investor had scooped up their home before it even hit the public market. 2 days later, on the morning of their eviction, I drove to the house. I parked my black Porsche Panamera across the street. It was raining again, just like that night 8 years ago. I watched from behind tinted windows as the sheriff's deputy stood on the porch. I saw my father carrying a box of books, his shoulders slumped, his walk shuffling and defeated. I saw my mother dragging a suitcase, her makeup streaked her fur coat looking tattered and sad in the gray light. They looked small. They looked pathetic. I rolled down my window as they reached the curb. They looked up. When they saw me, hope flared in their eyes. They thought I had come to save them. They thought I had changed my mind. My mother dropped the suitcase and ran toward my car. "Elena," she cried. "Thank God you came. I knew you would come. Open the trunk. Help your father with the boxes." I didn't unlock the doors. I just watched her through the open window. "I didn't come to help you move," I said. Her smile faltered. Then why are you here?" I reached into the passenger seat and picked up a large manila envelope. I held it out the window. "I came to give you this," I said. She took it, her hands shaking. She tore it open. Inside was a legal document, a notice to vacate immediately signed by the new owner. Phoenix Rising LLC. She read, confused. "Who is this? Why are you giving me this?" "Read the bottom," I said. "Read the signature of the managing member." She squinted at the bottom of the page. "Dr. Elena Rose," she gasped. The paper fluttered from her hand into a puddle. "You," she whispered. "You bought the house, I bought the debt," I corrected her. "I bought the mortgage note from the bank 3 days ago, and then I foreclosed on it. This house is mine now." My father had walked up behind her. He heard everything. He looked at the house, then at me, his face pale with shock. "You own it," he stammered. Then we can stay. We can stay, right? You wouldn't kick us out of your own house." I looked him dead in the eye. "I remember a night 8 years ago," I said softly. "I remember standing on this exact sidewalk. I remember begging you for one night because I had nowhere to go. Do you remember what you said, Dad?" He swallowed hard. He couldn't speak. "You said, 'I do not want a thief in my house.'" I put the car in drive. "I feel the same way," I said. "But we are not thieves," my mother screamed, grabbing the door handle. "You stole my childhood," I said. "You stole my trust. And you tried to steal my future to pay for a drug addict's lifestyle. That makes you the worst kind of thieves." I pulled the door handle out of her grip. "You have 1 hour to remove your personal belongings," I said. "After that, I am calling a junk removal service to empty the property. Anything left behind will be thrown away." "Elena, please," my father cried, tears streaming down his face. "Where will we go? We have no money. We have no friends." I looked at him one last time. "I hear there is a shelter downtown," I said. "It opens at 5. I suggest you get in line early." I rolled up the window, cutting off their screams. I didn't look back as I drove away. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel sad. I felt balance. The scales of the universe had finally tipped back to center. They were standing in the rain with garbage bags of clothes, facing a world that didn't care about them. They were finally living the life they had prescribed for me, and I was driving home to a warm house that was paid for, safe and entirely mine. The atrium of St. Jude Hospital is a cathedral of glass and steel. It is designed to inspire hope and convey stability. The floors are polished marble, and the air smells of expensive coffee and disinfectant. It is the heart of my kingdom. It is the place where I feel most in control. It was 5 in the afternoon during the shift change. The lobby was crowded. Doctors in white coats were grabbing espresso before their night rounds. Nurses were chatting near the elevators. Families were buying balloons and flowers from the gift shop. I was standing near the main information desk, signing a discharge authorization for a VIP patient. I felt calm. I felt powerful. The storm of the last few days had passed, and I was the only one left standing. Then the automatic door slid open with a violent whoosh. A hush fell over the area near the entrance. I looked up. My parents walked in. They did not look like the arrogant couple who had demanded the chief of surgery just a week ago. They looked like refugees from a disaster they had created. My mother's hair was disheveled. Her designer coat was stained with rain. My father was trailing behind her, carrying 2 plastic garbage bags that contained the last of their possessions. They had come here because they had nowhere else to go. They had come here to make a scene. They had come here to try and shame me into submission one last time. My mother spotted me instantly. Her eyes were wild. She dropped her bag on the pristine floor. Elena, she screamed. The sound echoed off the glass walls. Everyone turned. 50 pairs of eyes shifted from their coffees and their conversations to the spectacle unfolding at the entrance. I handed the clipboard back to the receptionist. I did not run. I did not hide. I turned to face them. My mother charged across the lobby. She looked like a woman possessed. She stopped 5 feet away from me, panting heavily. Her face was twisted with a mixture of grief and rage. "You took it all," she shrieked. "You took the house. You put your sister in jail. You left us on the street like dogs." The lobby went dead silent. A security guard started to move toward us, but I held up a hand to stop him. I wanted them to hear this. I wanted everyone to witness this. I did not take anything I said, my voice projecting clearly through the quiet space. I purchased a foreclosed property that had been abandoned by its owners due to financial negligence. That is called business. "Business," she screamed. She lunged forward but stopped herself. "We are your parents. How can you be so cold? How can you look at your father carrying his life in a garbage bag and feel nothing? You are a monster." My father stepped up beside her. He looked around at the crowd, seeing the doctors and nurses watching. He tried to salvage some dignity, but it was too late. "Elena, please," he said, his voice shaking. "This is not who we raised you to be. We raised you to be a good Christian girl. We raised you to have a heart." I laughed. It was a dry, sharp sound. "You raised me to be a spare part," I said. "You raised me to be an insurance policy for Sarah. And when the policy didn't pay out the way you wanted, you cancelled it." My mother couldn't take it anymore. The truth was too sharp. So she did what she always did. She played the biological card. She played the victim. She beat her chest with her fist. Tears streamed down her face, ruining her mascara. "I gave birth to you," she wailed. Her voice cracked with the sheer force of her desperation. "I carried you for 9 months. I went through labor for you. I fed you from my own body. I am your mother. You owe me your life." The words hung in the air. It was the ultimate guilt trip. It was the weapon mothers have used for centuries to control their children. "I made you, so I own you." I saw a young nurse near the elevator look down at her shoes. I saw a patient look at me with judgment. They didn't know the story. They just saw a crying mother and a stony-faced daughter. I took a step forward. My heels clicked loudly on the marble. I invaded her personal space. I looked down at her. I let the anger I had buried for 8 years rise up not as fire, but as ice. I looked her dead in the eye. "You gave birth to me." I said, my voice low but carrying to every corner of the room. "That is a biological fact. You gave me DNA. You gave me a name." I paused, letting the silence stretch. "But you also killed me." My mother flinched. She stopped crying. She stared at me in shock. "You killed me on a rainy Tuesday night 8 years ago." I continued, my voice rising with authority. "You killed me when you looked at your innocent daughter and called her a thief. You killed me when you threw me out into a storm with nothing but the clothes on my back because you preferred a comfortable lie over a difficult truth." I pointed a finger at her chest. "The girl you gave birth to died that night, Linda. She froze to death in a parking lot behind a Walmart. She died of hunger while you were eating steak dinners. She died of loneliness while you were celebrating holidays without her." I took a breath. I straightened my white coat. I looked around the lobby at my colleagues, at my staff, at the people who respected me. "Dr. Rose is standing before you now," I said. "And she was not born from you. She was reincarnated from the ashes you left behind. I built this person. I paid for this education. I earned this title. I did it while scrubbing dishes. I did it while sleeping in a car. I did it without a single dollar or a single kind word from you." I leaned in closer. "I am not your daughter anymore. I am a self-made woman, and the woman standing here owes you absolutely nothing. Not money, not pity, and certainly not love." My mother stood there, mouth open, unable to speak. The narrative she had built in her head that I was the ungrateful child had just been dismantled. She looked at my father, but he couldn't meet her eyes. He knew I was right. I turned to the security guard, who was waiting patiently by the pillar. "Officer Jenkins," I said. "Yes, Dr. Rose," he replied, stepping forward. "These individuals are trespassing on private property," I said. "They are disturbing the peace and harassing hospital staff. Please escort them off the premises immediately. If they return, call the police." My mother gasped. "You can't do this," she screamed as the officer took her arm. "Elena, we are your family." I turned my back on them. I walked toward the elevators. I heard the scuffle. I heard my father protesting weakly. I heard my mother screaming my name one last time before the automatic doors whooshed open and the cold Chicago wind swallowed them whole. I pressed the button for the 40th floor. The door slid shut, cutting off the noise of the lobby. I was alone in the elevator. I watched the numbers climb. 1, 2, 3. I caught my reflection in the polished steel doors. I didn't see a victim. I didn't see a broken girl. I saw Dr. Elena Rose. I saw a survivor. The elevator dinged at the top floor. I stepped out, ready to save more lives, knowing that I had finally completely saved my own. The day Sarah was discharged from St. Jude Hospital was not a celebration. There were no balloons. There were no flowers. There was only the cold, hard click of handcuffs and the stern face of Officer Miller. I watched from the window of my office on the 40th floor. Down below, the police cruiser was waiting at the ambulance bay. I saw the orderly wheel Sarah out. She was wearing a gray sweatsuit provided by the hospital social worker because her designer clothes had been seized as evidence. Her head was still bandaged. She looked small and frail, a stark contrast to the arrogant girl who had demanded I fix her problems just a week ago. Officer Miller helped her into the back of the car. She did not fight. The fight had been drained out of her during the detox process in the ICU. She had spent the last 3 days shivering and sweating as the heroin left her system, and the reality of her situation rushed in to replace it. She was charged with 3 felonies: possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute, insurance fraud, and identity theft regarding the use of my parents' information to secure loans. The district attorney was not lenient. He saw her for what she was, a predator who had used her own family as prey. Because she had no money for a high-powered defense attorney, she was assigned a public defender, a tired man who told her the truth. She was going to prison. Sarah Rose, the golden child, the fashion icon, the girl who was too good for medical school, was now inmate number 7,492 at the Cook County Department of Corrections. She traded her white Porsche for a prison van and her penthouse dreams for a 6x8 concrete cell. While Sarah was learning the harsh rules of her new life, my parents were facing their own reckoning. They had been evicted from the house on Oakwood Drive exactly 48 hours after I bought the debt. They left with 4 trash bags of clothes and a box of old photo albums. They stood on the curb waiting for a taxi because their car had been repossessed by the leasing company the same morning. I did not help them find a place. I did not offer them a deposit. I let them navigate the system they had looked down on their entire lives. They ended up at the Shady Pines Motor Inn, a dilapidated motel on the outskirts of the city, near the industrial park. It was the kind of place where the neon sign buzzed incessantly, and the police visited twice a night. They rented a single room with a kitchenette. It cost $200 a week, which was all they could afford with their meager Social Security checks. I know this because I hired a private investigator to keep tabs on them, not because I cared about their well-being, but because I wanted to ensure they stayed far away from me. The report I received was a grim portrait of karma. My father, Thomas, a man who used to wear Italian suits and lecture me about fiscal responsibility, was now working part-time as a greeter at a discount superstore. He spent his days standing on a rubber mat, forcing a smile at customers who ignored him, earning minimum wage to pay for canned soup and instant coffee. His hands, which used to sign checks with a flourish, were now rough and tired. My mother, Linda, a woman who prided herself on her garden and her social standing, was now washing their clothes in the motel sink because they could not afford the laundromat. She spent her days sitting in the cramped room, staring at the peeling wallpaper, waiting for a phone call from Sarah that would never come. They were living in a purgatory of their own making. They were surrounded by the poverty they used to mock, And the worst part for them was not the hunger or the cold. It was the silence. The phone never rang. No friends came to visit. The social circle they had cultivated, the neighbors they had impressed, the relatives they had lied to, all of them, vanished the moment the money ran out. But the ultimate twist, the knife in the wound that fate twisted daily, came from a glowing rectangle in the corner of their motel room. Their television. It was an old boxy model that came with the room, but it worked well enough to show them exactly what they had thrown away. 2 weeks after their eviction, Chicago Magazine released their annual issue. The cover story was titled, "The New Face of Medicine." And right there, in full-color, glossy, high definition, was my face. I was wearing my white coat, my arms crossed confidently, my eyes looking straight into the camera. The headline underneath read, "Dr. Elena Rose, the neurosurgeon who is rewriting the rules of trauma care." I can only imagine the scene in that motel room when they saw it. It was a Tuesday evening. They were likely eating a dinner of microwaved frozen meals, sitting on the edge of the sagging mattress. The local news was on. The anchor began a segment on the magazine feature. "Tonight, we sit down with Dr. Elena Rose, the youngest chief of neurosurgery at St. Jude Hospital and the recipient of this year's Golden Scalpel Award." I imagine my mother dropping her fork. I imagine my father leaning forward, squinting at the screen, trying to reconcile the woman on the television with the daughter he had called a thief. The interview played. On screen, I looked calm and poised. The interviewer asked me about my journey. "Dr. Rose, you have achieved so much at such a young age. Who is your support system? Who do you have to thank for your success?" In the motel room, my parents must have held their breath. They must have felt a spark of hope. Maybe she will mention us. Maybe she will thank us. Maybe this is the opening we need to get back in. On the screen, I smiled. It was a sad, knowing smile. "I am a self-made woman," I said to the camera. "I built this life from the ground up. I did it without family support. I did it despite the people who told me I was broken. So I would like to thank the 24-year-old version of myself, the girl who slept in her car and refused to give up. She is my hero." The interviewer nodded sympathetically. "That is incredibly inspiring. It sounds like you overcame a lot of adversity." "I did," I replied, "but sometimes you have to prune the dead branches to let the tree grow. I cut off the toxic parts of my life so I could survive. And I have never looked back." The segment ended. In the motel room, the silence must have been deafening. I had just told the entire city of Chicago that my parents were dead branches. I had publicly erased them from my narrative, just as they had tried to erase me from theirs. They tried to reach me after that. Of course they did. The next day, a letter arrived at my office. It was addressed to Dr. Elena Rose in my mother's handwriting. It was thick, likely filled with excuses and guilt trips and pleas for money. My secretary brought it to me. "Dr. Rose, this just arrived. It is marked personal. Do you want to read it?" I looked at the envelope. I looked at the return address. Shady Pines Motor Inn. I didn't even touch it. "No," I said. "Shred it." "Shred it?" she asked, surprised. "But it looks important." "It is junk mail," I said, turning back to my computer. Just clatter from the past. I heard the shredder whir to life. I heard the paper being sliced into 1,000 tiny confetti strips. It was a satisfying sound. They called the hospital switchboard too. My father tried to get through to my extension, claiming it was a family emergency. "I am sorry, sir," the operator told him, following my strict instructions. "Dr. Rose does not accept personal calls during working hours. And she has no family listed in her directory. Perhaps you have the wrong number." "No," he shouted. I was told later. "I am her father. Tell her I am sorry. Tell her we are starving, sir. If you continue to yell, I will have to hang up," the operator said. "Dr. Rose is currently in surgery, saving a life. She cannot be disturbed." Click. That was the reality of their new existence. They were ghosts haunting a building that I owned. They could see me on TV. They could read about me in Forbes. They could see my name on the donor wall of the hospital wing I had just funded. But they could not touch me. I was the star in the sky they looked up at, and they were the people stuck in the mud wondering how they had fallen so far. Every morning as I drove my Porsche past the exit that led to the industrial park, I thought of them for exactly 3 seconds. I thought of my mother washing clothes in the sink. I thought of my father greeting customers. I thought of Sarah staring at a concrete wall. And then I shifted gears, accelerated, and drove toward the skyline. I felt no guilt. I felt no obligation. I had paid my debts. I had saved Sarah's life which was more than she deserved. I had bought their house, which saved them from a foreclosure judgment on their credit record, though they didn't realize that mercy. I had given them exactly what they asked for 8 years ago. I had given them a life without me, and now they had to live it. There is a common misconception that when you cut off your biological family, you end up alone. People assume that being an orphan by choice means walking through life in solitary confinement. They think that without the people who share your DNA, you are somehow incomplete. They are wrong. I am not alone. In fact, my life is more full of love now than it ever was when I was trying to buy the affection of my parents. I did not lose a family. I built a new one, a better one, a family chosen not by blood, but by loyalty and mutual respect. My father figure is not the man who is currently living in a motel room. My father figure is Dr. Marcus Sterling, the former chief of staff who found me sleeping in the hospital library 8 years ago. He was the one who saw a starving medical student and didn't judge her. He gave me a key to the on-call room. He brought me sandwiches and pretended he had ordered too much for lunch. He was the one who sat in the front row at my graduation, cheering louder than anyone else when I walked across the stage. He taught me how to hold a scalpel, but more importantly, he taught me that I was worthy of occupying space in this world. And then there is Daniel, Dr. Daniel Thorne, the head of pediatric cardiology, the man who is currently waiting for me at home. I met Daniel 3 years ago during a complex trauma case involving a car accident victim. We fought over a treatment plan for 20 minutes in the hallway. I admired his stubbornness. He admired my precision. Daniel knows everything. He knows about the night in the rain. He knows about the soup kitchen. He knows about the deep-seated fear I have of losing everything. He does not tell me to forgive and forget. He does not tell me that they are my parents and I should be the bigger person. He simply holds my hand when the nightmares come. He stands between me and the world when I am tired. Last month he proposed to me, not with a flashy public spectacle like Sarah would have wanted, but quietly in our kitchen while we were making pasta. He looked at me and said, "Elena, you are the strongest person I have ever met. I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to be strong alone again." That is love. That is family. I left the hospital at 6 in the evening. The Chicago winter was in full force, but inside my Porsche Panamera, it was warm and quiet. The engine purred with a power that responded to my slightest touch. I gripped the leather steering wheel, feeling the smooth texture under my palms. I drove north along Lakeshore Drive. The city lights reflected off the dark water of Lake Michigan. I passed the exit for the industrial park where the Shady Pines Motor Inn was located. I didn't even glance at it. That exit led to the past. I was driving toward the future. My house is a modern glass villa perched on a bluff overlooking the lake. It has floor-to-ceiling windows that let in the light. It has a chef's kitchen where I cook dinner for my friends. It has a library filled with first editions. Every brick, every beam, every piece of furniture was paid for with money I earned. There is no mortgage. There is no debt. It is a fortress of peace. I pulled into the heated garage and parked next to Daniel's vintage Mustang. I walked into the mudroom, kicking off my heels. I could smell garlic and roasting rosemary. Daniel was home early. I walked into the kitchen. He was at the stove tasting a sauce. He turned when he heard me, his face lighting up with a genuine warmth that still catches me off guard. "Hey, Chief," he said, smiling. "How was the craniotomy textbook?" I said, walking over to kiss him. The patient is awake and talking. I leaned against the marble island watching him cook. It was a simple domestic moment, but to me it was a miracle. This safety, this normalcy. This was everything I had fought for. Then I saw it. On the counter, amidst a stack of medical journals and wedding invitations, sat a single envelope. It stood out because of the cheap, thin paper. It was stained slightly on the corner. The handwriting was jagged and desperate. I knew that handwriting. It belonged to my mother. Daniel followed my gaze. He stopped stirring the sauce. His expression tightened. "I am sorry," he said. "It must have slipped through the mail filter. I can throw it away for you. You do not have to touch it." I reached out and picked it up. It felt light. It felt insignificant. 8 years ago, a letter from them would have made me vomit with anxiety. It would have ruined my week. I would have agonized over what it said, wondering if they finally loved me, wondering if I should respond. Now I just felt boredom. I looked at the postmark. It was mailed 3 days ago. I knew exactly what was inside. I didn't need to open it to hear the voice. Elena, we are desperate. Elena, it is cold. Elena, we are sorry, but we need money. Elena, remember the Bible says, honor your father and mother. It was the last gasp of a dying dynamic. They were trying to reach a version of me that no longer existed. They were trying to pull a string that had been severed a long time ago. I walked over to the living room. The gas fireplace was roaring, casting a warm golden glow across the room. Elena Daniel asked softly, watching me, "Are you okay?" "I am better than okay," I said. I stood in front of the fire. I held the envelope up to the light. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel hate. I just felt a profound sense of closure. I didn't rip it up. I didn't scream at it. I simply tossed it into the flames. It landed on a log. For a second, nothing happened. Then the edge of the cheap paper caught fire. It curled, blackening and twisting. The blue ink of my mother's handwriting bubbled and vanished. The stamp melted. In 3 seconds, it was gone, turned to ash, just like the relationship it represented. I watched the smoke rise up the chimney, carrying their demands out into the cold night air where they belonged. I turned back to Daniel. He was watching me with pride in his eyes. "What did it say?" he asked. I smiled, a real genuine smile that reached my eyes. "I don't know," I replied, walking back into the warmth of the kitchen, "and I don't care. Now tell me about this sauce. It smells amazing." I wrapped my arms around my fiancé and buried my face in his shoulder. Outside, the wind howled and the snow fell, covering the tracks of who I used to be. But inside, the fire was warm, the food was good, and I was finally exactly where I was supposed to be. Home. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this journey. My story is not just about a neurosurgeon who bought her parents' house or a sister who finally faced justice. It is a story about the most difficult realization a human being can have. The realization that the people who are supposed to love you the most are sometimes the ones holding the knife. If there is one thing I want you to take away from my experience, it is this. Biology is nothing more than a biological coincidence. It is a shared set of genetic markers. It does not guarantee love. It does not guarantee safety. And it certainly does not guarantee loyalty. Real family is not defined by whose DNA you carry. Real family is defined by who stands beside you when the storm hits. Real family are the people who cheer for your victories without jealousy and who sit with you in the dark without judgment. For me, my family is Daniel. It is my mentor, Marcus. It is the friends who became my safety net when I had none. I know there are many of you listening right now who are in the same position I was 8 years ago. You are the black sheep. You are the scapegoat. You are the one who is always blamed and never heard. You might be feeling guilty for setting boundaries. You might be feeling afraid to cut ties. Please hear me when I say this. You are not wrong for choosing yourself. You are not selfish for protecting your peace. Do not let anyone, not even your mother or your father, extinguish your light with their lies. They do not own your future. You do. You have the power to walk away. You have the power to rebuild. And you have the power to be happy. If my story resonated with you, or if you have ever had to overcome a toxic family dynamic to find your own success, I want to hear from you. Go to the comments section right now and type the words, "I won." Let those 2 words be your declaration of independence. Let them be a signal to everyone else reading that survival is possible. I read every single comment and I want to celebrate your strength. And please, do not forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these stories reach the people who really need to hear them. Also, you might be wondering about one loose end. Mark, the boyfriend who was driving the Porsche, the man who left my sister to die in a snowstorm and ran away. He thought he had escaped. He thought he could disappear into the night, but he forgot that I am a woman who pays attention to details. I found him, and let's just say that what happened to him is a story so satisfying it deserves its own video. If you want to hear how I tracked him down and delivered the final piece of justice, make sure you have notifications turned on. You will not want to miss the bonus chapter. Until then, remember to stand tall. You are worthy, you are enough, and you are free.